Welcome to my world history notes where I read from the book I wrote to teach homeschoolers world history. A Bible believer looks at world history. I don't expect you to agree with my conclusions that I draw. It is from the point of view of a Bible believer. That would exclude somebody who is an atheist, a Muslim, a Hindu, Roman Catholic, most Protestants, and many Baptists. So I believe the Bible literally to be true and judge everything by it. But regardless of that, I'm happy if you have a conclusion, although maybe vastly different from mine, but a conclusion that you've drawn from your study of history and not just reading some demagogue's opinion to get agenda, to get agenda driven, to get you to do something or think something. Just want you to study world history. And it's great if you disagree with me. That means you're thinking. So let's begin. You can buy my book on lulu.com, amazon.com, or at the Bible Baptist bookstore. But remember, it's just kind of a springboard to get you started um, in your own studies. So we'll begin here. Moving west and south out into the Pacific Ocean, west of the modern day country of Chile, I want to briefly touch on a mystery before we sum up what we've discussed. Easter Island is one of the most isolated pieces of land in the world. Easter Island was once covered by tropical plant and animal life. Now it's a barren wasteland. 1,600 years ago, settlers began arriving from the western part of the Pacific as the islands of that ocean began to be populated, and earlier peoples were pushed further and further out to make room for new populations or population surpluses. The massive stone heads that stand on that island and which have given it an air of mystery were carved, it is thought, as stone representations of spiritual power by these people. The great forests were cut down starting in the 800s, and by the 1400s, as the people cleared the land for gardens to build the canoes and to transport the stone heads carved by the various clans on the island. Each generation tried to outdo the previous in the size of these heads to show their own superiority. But, like the Mayans, the Eastern Islanders were headed toward ecological disaster. Taking from a 1995 Discover magazine article by Jared Diamond, and I'm quoting, after a few centuries, they began erecting stone statues on platforms, like the ones their Polynesian forebears had carved. With passing years, the statues and platforms became larger and larger, and the statues began sporting 10-ton red crowns, probably an escalating spiral of one-upmanship as rival clans tried to surpass each other with shows of wealth and power. In the same way, successive Egyptian pharaohs built ever larger pyramids. Today, Hollywood movie moguls near my home, this is the author talking, in Los Angeles are displaying their wealth and power by building ever more ostentatious mansions. Tycoon Marvin Davis topped previous moguls with plans for a 50,000 square foot house. So now Aaron Spelling has topped Davis with a 56,000 square foot house. All that those buildings lack to make the message explicit are 10-ton red crowns. On Easter, as in modern America, society was held together by a complex political system to redistribute locally available resources and to integrate the economies of different areas. Eventually, Easter's growing population was cutting the forest more rapidly than the forest was regenerating. The people used the land for gardens and the wood for fuel, canoes, and houses, and of course for lugging statues. As forests disappeared, the islanders ran out of timber and rope to transport and erect their statues. Life became more uncomfortable, springs and streams dried up, and wood was no longer available for fires. People also found it harder to fill their stomachs as land birds, large sea snails, and many seabirds disappeared. Because timber for building seagoing canoes vanished, fish catches declined, and porpoises disappeared from the table. Crop yields also declined since deforestation allowed the soil to be eroded by rain and wind, dried by the sun, and its nutrients to be leached from it. Intensified chicken production and cannibalism replaced only part of all those lost foods. Preserved statuettes with sunken cheeks and visible ribs suggest that people were starving. With the disappearance of food surpluses, Easter Island could no longer feed the chiefs, bureaucrats, and priests who had kept a complex society running. Surviving islanders described to early European visitors how local chaos replaced centralized government, and a warrior class took over from the hereditary chiefs. The stone points of spears and daggers made by the warriors during their heyday in the 1600s and 1700s still litter the ground of Easter today. But by around 1700, the population began to crash toward one quarter and one tenth of its former number. People took to living in caves for protection against their enemies. Around 1770, rival clans started to topple each other's statues, breaking the heads off. Unquote. Now, outside of aliens or people from the lost continent of Atlantis erecting these stone heads, this is the best explanation for them I could find. I bring up Easter Island because of its heyday during the period that I've just talked about for several sessions. The history of the rest of Polynesia and Australasia I'll cover in coming sessions. So we've now covered the period of the Dark and Middle Ages outside of Europe. We briefly discussed many issues and peoples, any one of which could be the subject of an entire 30-chapter book. There are many things I didn't cover, and as a history book, history discussion can only be a springboard to your own personal study. I leave that up to you. Get plenty of sources, not just one textbook, and judge everything by the Bible, the only sure and absolutely truthful word you have, as it is from God Himself. From the Mongols who took who the book Warriors of the Steppes by Eric Hildinger says were equal by no people in history as being naturally expert in war, to the Aztecs whose brief empire may have ruled or influenced tens of millions of people in Central America, according to the book 1491. We've seen that there was a big world out there that was about to be changed forever by people from Europe. Next, I'm going to talk about the swirling cauldron of nations that arose in Europe after the era that saw the Battle of Hastings in 1066 and the Great Schism in the Roman Catholic Church and Greek churches in 1054. So, what you should take from this, all the several sessions that we've talked about. What was the Germanic tribe that dominated the area known as Spain from 409 to 711 AD? What was the religious group that denied the equality of Jesus Christ with God the Father? What was the name of the greatest of Mongol leaders? What country became Christian under Vladimir, 5th Grand Duke of Kiev, who ruled from 972 to 1015? The enormous bodies of law and commentary established by the Jews in Palestine and Babylon were called what? What Central American warlike tribe practiced butchery and murder similar to medieval Europeans? What was the name of the Spanish conqueror of Mexico? These are things that you should consider and to learn what they are. We're going to talk about the darkest before the dawn in Europe in the late medieval period next. So we'll get back to what you're familiar with. I look forward to talking to you again. Thank you for watching.